everybody, and welcome to today's One Business World webinar, hosted in partnership with us at Flynn Partners. I'm Debbie Flynn, and I'm the Global Travel Practice Leader here. I'm based in London, and I'm really thrilled to be moderating this important conversation, contributing to One Business World's Climate and Sustainability Leadership 2025 Forum during this New York Climate Week. And today's session that we're looking at today, we've entitled Planet Smart Innovation, Products and Experiences for Climate Conscious Consumers. As sustainability becomes a central pillar of consumer decision-making, we're witnessing a powerful convergence across industries, fashion, food, packaging and travel, all reimagining their offerings to align with climate goals and this increasing consumer demand. But how do we ensure these innovations remain desirable, accessible, and impactful? Today, we're going to explore how brands are creating holistic, sustainable experiences that resonate with today's travellers. We'll also get into the cross-sector collaboration, the evolving expectations of climate-conscious consumers, and the innovations that are shaping the future of travel. I'm joined today by a very impressive panel of experts who are leading the charge in their respective fields, and each representing a pillar of today's theme. And first of all, I'd like to introduce you to Paul Strachan. He is the Executive Director of Global Communications for the Bahamas Ministry of Aviation and Tourism. And Paul has had an amazing career in the travel industry. And in fact, he started in a small hotel in the Bahamas. So he's had that real grassroots experience and then built a career up over 30 years with the Bahamas Ministry of Tourism, running China and Canada, and now running global communications across the world. So good to see you, Paul, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you.
I'll move on now to Michael Winters. He is the President and Chief Revenue Officer for WinCup, and he leads their sales and marketing organizations, overseeing the company's supply chain group, including customer service and purchasing and logistics, and has got a stellar 18 years behind him, where he spent years with Georgia Pacific, a leading paper and packaging manufacturing in Georgia. Is that right? Is that right, Michael? Have I got that right?
That's correct.
Great, and welcome. Good to see you here today. Moving on now, back in London where I am, is Carol Rose. She's Head of Sustainability for the Association of British Travel Agents. And Carol is particularly poignant for this event because she comes from the world of fashion, where she worked before entering the travel space. She led the design and development of many ranges for UK fashion brands such as Burberry, TM Lewin, Topman, and Burton Menswear. She's travelled around the globe working with diverse supply chains to review design and production techniques. And now she's bringing all this sustainability expertise from fashion into the travel industry with her position at ABTA, and really does sort of look at it from a different perspective as well. So great to see you, Carol. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Debbie. Lovely to be here. If I could just correct you on ABTA's title, it's the Travel Association. So it's ABTA, the Travel Association.
I'm showing my
no
age
longer
here,
the association.
I know.
Sorry?
I'm showing my age. I'm showing my age
I know.
because I've known you as that for so many years.
Yep,
The Travel
yes.
Association. But basically, you're an organisation that brings together all the travel agencies across the UK, aren't you? And guiding them in terms of how they manage their sustainability planning. And in terms of sustainability planning, last but by no means least is Jeremy Sampson. He is the CEO of the Travel Foundation, who are one of the world's leading, most influential, mission-driven organisations in tourism. Catalysing change in the sector by advancing climate resilience, destination equity, and long-term visibility across the sector. And he has been a passionate advocate. He's co-authored the UN Tourism Glasgow Declaration on Climate Action. That is a mouthful, isn't it, Jeremy? And helped launch the Future Tourism Coalition, and is probably one of the most vocal climate commentators on the global travel circuit. And I would say, today is very much talking about how different people that affect the day-to-day traveller collaborate. And I think, Jeremy, could safely say you're probably one of the best collaborators globally in travel. So it's really great to have you on board.
Well, thanks. It's great to be here. Thanks, Debbie.
So I'm going to begin with you, Paul. to talk about our subject from a destination perspective, because without the allure of the destination and all that drives travel consumption, none of us would have a product to talk about. How is the Bahamas approaching issues like climate change, rising sea level, and hurricane resilience?
Well, Debbie, climate change and is not it's not in the distant future for us. It's something that's present and very pressing for us. So in tourism, this means that we're implementing robust climate change measures to safeguard against the destruction of our natural assets and our communities in several ways. One is nature-based, where we are including mangrove restoration and the protection of our coastal areas and the protection of our seagrass seabeds. We're also looking at renewable energy initiatives that include integrating more solar power into our environment and trying obviously to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels. Community engagement, where we are engaging communities and people in those communities to actively engage in climate resilience and sustainable tourism practices, and obviously collaborating with international agencies and partners to mitigate any sort of climate change issues.
Thank you. I mean, it's a big job, isn't it, when you're actually the destination itself? And Jeremy, if I come on to you, you often talk about nature-based solutions as being mission critical. Tell us more about why this is such an important place to start and who you believe is leading the way. And if you think these initiatives are actually making a difference to consumer choice of the destination that they're going to holiday in.
Yeah, well, I think it's important to recognize first that nature is really the foundation of the travel industry. Without beautiful reefs, beaches, forests, wildlife, there's no tourism product in many places. So nature-based solutions are ways of working with nature, like restoring forests, wetlands, coral reefs, mangroves, to help protect people, communities, and economies from climate change. It's a form of adaptation. And they're essentially using the power of healthy ecosystems to keep us safer while also making places better for both residents and travelers. Better, more beautiful, and more enjoyable to experience. So in a way, this is the most effective and affordable form of climate adaptation that the travel industry has, to implement, and this helps to certainly enhance and protect the visitor experience at a time where that is often a challenge for places that are experiencing some form of degradation or risk from climate change impacts. And we also know that travelers increasingly will choose destinations that safeguard ecosystems, whether or not they know it, directly from their choices. But we know that travelers choose places that are beautiful and that where they are going to have an authentic experience, whether that's related to culture or nature. So this makes nature-based solutions both a resilient strategy and a market differentiator for places that are doing it well. I have a couple of good examples and maybe a couple data points as well. So World Wildlife Fund tells us that for every $1 invested in mangrove restoration, that yields about $4 in avoided damages and improved fisheries. So often that's the cost of inaction defined, and it shows us how those small investments in restoring nature can have wide results. And Euromonitor from 2024 told us that 50% of global travelers, actually 60% global travelers, say they're willing to pay more for nature positive, sustainable experiences. So not just do they want things to be more sustainable, but they are willing to put their dollars or their pounds or their euros where their mouths are, so to speak. A couple quick examples in the Bahamas and across the Caribbean, there are great examples of reef and mangrove restoration projects which are funded by tourism revenues, and those are protecting coastlines from storm surges, for example, which are increasing in the age of climate impact. So important to have that money flowing directly from the tourism sector to that to those adaptation measures. And a project I got to work on in the Mediterranean, it's called the Meat Network, was a great example, I think, of just protected areas being valued as part of an ecosystem. So in that project, we were able to partner protected area managers with private sector operators to co-design itineraries and tourism experiences that have put money directly into conservation objectives and achieved both conservation objectives and sort of market demand opportunities to make them sellable and create new experiences that would value that protected area in a new and better way. So yeah, lots of great examples of where nature is playing a key role for tourism's climate action.
That's brilliant. And I think probably, if you think about the number of destinations and choice of destinations there are around the world for people to choose from, and the fact that many people are choosing their holidays for a nature experience. And at the same time, I think they're seeing more in the media about what's happening because of the climate. So they're better educated. So if they are seeing destinations that really care about it, I think they'll make those educated choices. And Michael, coming on to you, when we talk about maybe media exposure, and staying on the subject of nature, we all remember that video story that went viral with the turtle and the straw. And it was certainly a global movement that moved the dial for consumers in terms of understanding the impact plastic had on nature. And Michael, your Fade product has seen WinCup evolve from, and I think it's been quoted, these aren't my words, from environmental villain to environmental hero. Please tell us more about, as such a pioneer in biodegradable products, how Fade has impacted so much of the hospitality sector globally already.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Debbie. And just to briefly go into WinCup and who we are, we're a 60-year-old company. We have 8 manufacturing plants across the US, so we're very large from a scale standpoint, and we reach a lot of distribution, whether it be major retailers, QSRs, hotels, motels, airports, professional sports stadiums. So we have that breadth. The food service market's about a $27.5 billion market. And historically, our company many years ago was seen as a non-biodegradable, non-compostable type of company that was producing billions and billions and billions of units a year going out servicing these customers. And along came this turtle video, which you just mentioned in 2017. And it really struck at the heartstrings of consumers around the world when they saw this video of a turtle with a straw stuck in his nose. And I will tell you, it ignited a fire in us to go out and find a better way, to find a better solution, to find new raw materials that could actually help prevent plastic pollution and plastics in the ocean. And it was real, this straws is a small category of ours. We produce a lot of different categories, but straws kind of became the lightning rod of this video. And it was seen as the villain, as you said, Debbie, plastic straws out there. So we found ourselves at a real crossroads. Either we could become part of the problem or continue to be part of the problem, or we could be part of the solution. And so we chose the latter. We just didn't think it made any sense whatsoever for manufacturers to produce disposable products that would hang around for 10, 20, 50, 100 years when they're used once and then disposed of. It just didn't make sense. There had to be a better way. So we went on this global search for new biopolymers that were being worked on. And we found a new substrate called polyhydroxyalkanose. PHA is the name, is the acronym of this product. And it's made from fermented canola oil. So we figured out how to take basically cooking oil and replace plastic products with it. And the really neat thing there is that cooking oil is all natural based and it goes away very, very quickly once exposed to bacteria. our fade products will degrade in the matter of a few months, leaving no harmful residue left behind. So I think that was really, we launched these PHA-based products in the fade category, which is about a $600 million a year category, knowing that it could maybe be the face of a turn, a pivot, so to say. And almost 4 billion straws later, we've sold throughout the world. 4 billion straws will go around the earth about 21 times. So that's how much plastic we've taken out of the supply chain just by focusing our efforts on straws. That's the very first category. We took this new substrate to. We are now taking it to the cutlery category. We're now taking it to paper cup category. Most people don't realize that paper cups are fiber on the outside, and most paper cups have a polyethylene plastic lining in it. So traditional paper cups are not biodegradable, they're not compostable, and they're not recyclable because of the plastic and the fiber. So we're taking this PHA substrate and we're lining the inside of the cup so it will totally degrade in a matter of a couple months. Should it end up in an ocean? Should it end up in a composting pile, right? We hope people put it in a composting pile, but we never know where these products will end up. So innovation can help solve problems that's at the doorstep of consumers around the world, and that's really what we're focusing on.
It's incredible. I mean, those are amazing stats, and I think if anything, it goes to show we're all here talking in 2025 New York Climate Week, but there is a will, isn't there? And I think probably what WinCup has showed is that actually you were able to stop and say, hang on a minute, there's got to be a better way. And I think, there'll be things hopefully we'll talk about today, and there'll other people be talking about all week at different sessions that will see changes like this. So it's fantastic. And Paul, back to you, and sort of staying on this theme just for a little bit. You talked about the Bahamas being known for your marine ecosystems and fragile coral reefs. What initiatives have you currently got underway to protect these natural assets?
Two major initiatives, Debbie. One is Mission for Mangrove, which was launched shortly after the devastation of Hurricane Dorian. And that's a program in Grand Bahama Island that works with the locals and with visitors to replant mangroves. And we all know how important mangroves are to the ecosystems. And then the Reef Network, the Reef Rescue Network, actually, which is one of the largest reef restoration programs in the world. And we currently have 24 dive shops enrolled in the Bahamas across 14 islands, and doing a great job with restoring the coral. And we all know how delicate the coral ecosystems are.
Fantastic. And actually, on that subject of coral ecosystems, Michael, and this is a subject very close to your heart, because in addition to FADE producing marine biodegradable drinking straws for hotels and restaurants, you're also part of the bigger picture by building coral forts under the ocean. And I just love this story when I saw it. Tell us more, and because I know it became a huge story, and they were called the coral saving straws, I believe.
Yeah, it's interesting. We got a call a couple of years ago from a university in South Florida that had a big marine biological program. And they were growing baby coral in their university, and then they were going out and planting baby coral along the reefs of South Florida to try to help repopulate coral reefs. Due to the rising ocean temperatures and pollution and bleaching that was taking place with coral, there was obviously a lot of death in the coral reefs of South Florida. So as they were going out and planting baby coral, they were planting them on these limestone discs. And what was happening was, as they started doing their research and their studies, was only about 40% of their coral was surviving. So 60% of everything they were planting was dying. So you think about that, about the labor time and the fuel time and the boat time and the constant management of trying to get baby coral to survive. What was happening was, at least in South Florida, parrotfish were going down and biting and nipping away at the baby coral because it was young and tender, and thus killing the baby coral. So when they called us a couple of years ago, they said that they were using our fade straws in coral reef restoration work. And we were like, you're doing what with our straws? That really wasn't the intended purpose of creating these cool biodegradable straws, but we'll take it. So we flew down to South Florida and went out on one of the dive boats. And I know, Paul, you mentioned all the dive shops in the Bahamas. So we spent quite a bit of time with the divers and found out they had created what's called the coral fort. So they decided to make a fort around the baby coral on these limestone discs. So it kept the parrotfish from actually being able to penetrate the straws to nibble away and bite and harm the baby coral. The other cool thing is that I found out about parrotfish that I didn't know about is that parrotfish won't dive at more than a 60-degree angle. So parrotfish will not go down just straight down on top of the coral because they're afraid, I guess, another predator fish will snatch them up if they expose themselves straight down. So what happened was a remarkable story, right? 40% survival rate jumped to over 90 to 95% survival rate with these straws around the fort. So previously, these divers had experimented with some metal cages and some PVC piping cages that collected a lot of algae, restricted water flow, and that restricted enough water flow ended up killing the baby coral. So with our marine biodegradable fade straws, what happened was the straws within about 2-3 months had fully degraded. And by that time, the baby coral was strong enough to fend off the parrotfish attacks. And thus their survivalship went to over 90%. So we were absolutely thrilled that our straws could actually play a part in the survivalship of new baby coral in the ocean. Like I said before, we didn't create and innovate this product with coral reefs in mind, but the way I like to talk about it is unintended consequences of innovation. Sometimes if you have a problem and you put all your resources towards solving that problem, it may solve another problem as well. We were
I
so
love that. It's such a great story, isn't it?
And we were so fortunate that CBS National News heard about what we were doing and called us up and flew down to South Florida and met us. And they took their film crew out on the boat with us, and they did a national story on Fade and the Coral Fort story. So we're so happy we could help out. We're also working with some groups over in Hawaii with a similar type problem they have. I think it probably depends upon the particular ocean and the environment as to what type of predator could be restricting coral growth in the particular regions around the world.
Amazing. Well, maybe Paul, I should connect you two after this, just in case there's any, so you get the fade straws into the Bahamas. So Carol, you feel very passionately that in travel we talk a lot about nature and plastic, which we just have for quite a bit, but not enough about textiles and their role in ensuring the holistic, sustainable experience. And I remember you sharing with me, Carol, that worldwide there is, I think you said 92 million tons of textile waste being generated every year. So I'd love to really hear your perspective and how you feel key players in the travel industry can reimagine their use of textiles to close the loop that I think you're going to talk us through.
Okay, thank you. First and foremost to say, Michael, what an incredible project. you've initiated, and it just shows, you know, once you lay the seed or set the seed, how that, you know, expands into other areas. And I'd love to talk to you more about how to develop more sort of biodegradable textiles, actually. So yeah, so from an ABTA perspective, we, as you know, we don't have products. We are a guide for the industry, and I work on the sustainability side. And we talked about nature. So what I did when I joined, coming in with my brain from a design background, as it were, I thought, well, we should be looking at nature as our primary source, and then everything else fits into that. All of the decarbonisation strategies all should fit into a nature strategy. So we updated our narrative to include nature as our overarching framework, because we know that 80% of our travels, goods and services rely on nature. You know, including textiles, as it were. So we have, you know, robust frameworks and systems in place to help our members and their supply chain, especially in the travel tour operators, work with hotels that are certified to the highest standard, working with specific certification models. So we're doing that through a program that we're running currently with our tour operators, ensuring that as many hotels as possible are working and are accredited to a specific list. And we're hoping someday the textile side of things will be included in these specifications. I know GSTC touched on it very briefly when I joined travel. So over 92 million tons of textile waste ends up in landfill, because it's not biodegradable or it's incinerated, and both those elements emit harmful gases into the atmosphere. And to add that, I'd say 70% of textiles used in the textile industry, not just clothing, but also the uniform industry, is polyester based, i.e. it is plastic. So there is a huge issue here with repurposing that particular strain of textiles. And because it doesn't biodegrade, so it will stay in landfill for thousands of years. And then we talk about recycled polyester. Well, it's a bit of a myth that it's sustainable, because it has to go through such a process to reintroduce it back into the system that I would argue whether it's sustainable or not. But then you have the health issue as well with using such a huge amount of polyester-based fibers. One is that it goes back into the supply chain or the water chain and the food chain through the release of microfibers, small plastic particles that just shed from polyester fibers back into the waterways through your laundering system, and also into the human body. So there's health risk there. I remember being on a trip to the Caribbean, actually, where I was overseeing or just looking at an audit, a hotel audit in Jamaica, as it were, from our travel accommodation expert Travel Life, which is part of an ABTA brand. And I just watched these poor individuals wearing black polyester trousers and polyester t-shirts, just sweltering in the heat, because nobody's reimagined what you could do with innovative textiles in the uniform industry, and obviously trickling down to airlines and hotels. So there's a huge piece of connecting that needs to be done, where there's an intersection with textiles and travel. The fashion industry has huge amounts of initiatives for textile waste and collection to repurpose textiles into another source, to another area. So my thing is, this can be done in travel and tourism, and there are a number of initiatives in place already doing that. For instance, in Spain, there are a number of hotel groups working with an organization called Reshaping, and they are not travel-based, they're textile-based. So they supply textile-based product to the travel industry, but they've initiated an R&D program where they're collecting textile waste, shredding, resorting, and repurposing that textile into a new economy, into something else. And there are a number of these circular models in place currently in Europe, and some in the USA, and some in the UK. So it's not unheard of. It just needs to be, I think, reimagined, more information and awareness being raised by these types of platforms to look at textiles specifically, and not just textiles in the wild, but it's the intersection in travel and tourism, because it doesn't just have one life. It has, you know, several, one in the hospitality sector, but also the waste, the textiles that people buy before they travel. Don't we all? Well, I try not to, but you know, you run out and you buy little bits and pieces for your holidays. And you probably don't wear it again. And come the next holiday, then you think, I don't want this. I want something fresh, because, you know, we know that there are humans interface with clothing and textiles on two reasons. One, it's a necessity, we need it. But the other is that we are emotionally connected to the clothes that we wear. We love it. And then we end up not loving it because something's changed and we discard those products. But that's a cycle that we're all involved in. So for me, there's a need to look at this material area of travel and tourism and looking at some of those models that exist currently, looking at how those models can be expanded, so this becomes a concentration point in the industry.
And thank you, Carol. I mean, those are staggering figures. And I think you're right. We don't really talk about it very often. We talk about, you know, energy and waste, and particularly food waste. So, yes, to be talking more about it on both levels, it also probably needs some kind of, you know, the power of the consumer actually understanding this, and a bit like we were talking earlier about the straw, it needs that kind of social power. Potentially, but for it to be part of the conversation is really important.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. As you know, ABTA, we run a holiday habits survey on a yearly basis, where our comms team will survey around 2,500 members of the population to get their view on travel and tourism entirely. But we have a specific area on sustainability, and results show that travelers are influenced by sustainability choice. It's not the choice that finally, you know, it's not the final decision that governs where they go on their holidays, but they want the industry to lead them. They say, look, we care about sustainability, but we believe it's the industry's responsibility to be sustainable, to give us sustainable products. And you know, and we will adhere, basically. So the onus, I believe, is not just on the consumer, but it's on the industry to take initiative and to act, as it's done with net zero strategies and decarbonisation. We need to be holistic in our approach to sustainability issues, and it falls very much in line with the SDGs 17 Sustainability Development Goals. There are 17 levels within that, all interacting for a greater good for humanity and the planet.
And I think you're absolutely right, and that's what we're going to talk a little bit more about now. But maybe, Carol, in the next survey, you should ask people how many new clothes they buy to go on holiday. That might give you a story to get it talked out there. Anyway,
Absolutely,
that's just an idea for a PR person.
Okay. Yeah.
What I'd like to do now is actually turn to the importance of the community, in terms of, without the community, you know, what is the future travelers product experience, and what's changing there. And Jeremy, you always talk about the importance of positioning climate action not as a burden, but as a Trojan horse for building the kind of travel industry and experiences that you've long been advocating for, in terms of low impact, values driven, and authenticity. And the community really is at the heart of this. So talk us through your vision of the perfect community-based tourism model.
Sure. Well, I should start out by saying that it's probably not right to say that you know, or unfair to say that climate change and climate impacts are not a burden, because we know that they are, and that they are creating all kinds of challenges for places, for communities, particularly vulnerable communities and populations. And so I want to recognize that. I just think that also, that there is often, several dimensions to a challenge and to crisis, and in many ways, I do see that that the climate emergency in some ways does also create some opportunity for change. We've been advocating for change for a long time, and the question has quite rightly been about the business case for action on sustainability, on some of these wider issues. Everyone working within travel and tourism is working on the margins, and ultimately the job of the sector is to sell travel and to have travel experiences and to grow those travel experiences to benefit people and places. And so ultimately, that is at the heart of what we're doing, and at the heart of that business case, we have not seen over time quite the sort of urgent response or necessary changes to evolve the industry into something that's sort of more equitable and more sustainable. But climate change seems to be starting to create more urgency and more of a sense of prioritization for those conversations about creating an industry that many of us have been advocating for a long time. So it is in that way a bit of a Trojan horse to sustainability, a better sort of holistic model that is more authentic, more values driven, lower sort of negative impact on places, and less extractive, and more of a positive impact on communities, and helping to support wider community objectives, quality of life, conservation, etc. So I think it's interesting maybe to reflect a bit on COVID as where we had perhaps in retrospect a short-term crisis that was obviously quite a serious situation, and in many places travel was shut down for an extended period of time, creating huge burdens on communities, on local businesses, and those who were able to adapt quickly and have some resilience to that situation were those who were able to also create a bit of opportunity out of the crisis, and to perhaps absorb some of that shock, or be a bit more resilient. In many cases, those were destinations or businesses that pivoted to a local market, market segment, such as people coming from their own community, or people coming nearby where they weren't necessarily going to have to cross a border with safety protocols, or fly long haul at a time when there just wasn't that option. And so it's interesting to reflect on how how the sort of climate crisis is predicted to affect the global tourism sector, and alongside other challenges that we're seeing related to the global economy, to geopolitics, and the sort of these interrelated complex challenges that the industry and society are facing. And it seems to me an opportunity to build resilience by creating a community, a model that is focused first and foremost on, number one, what do communities need? So not just tourism for tourism's sake or for tourism's growth's sake, but how does tourism deliver on those objectives that communities have related to the SDGs, or to, as Carol said, or to how can tourism be a part of the solution in many cases to the challenge that we're facing, that and tourism touches everything: agriculture, textiles, basically every single economy, I think, is interrelated and interconnected with the tourism sector, as in both the impact that it has and the opportunity for solutions. So I believe in terms of the best sort of model of where communities win is a tourism sector that has diversified in order to build some resilience. So it's not overly dependent on any one market. It's not overly dependent on a particular season where the place becomes very crowded, and then there are less visitors during other times, and this means that there's more of a challenge in creating a stable economy or stable work, healthy work for the workforce. And it is a sector that is diverse and resilient, and it's who it is marketing to, able to sort of make those shifts as needed and service different different aspects of the visitor economy. And then on the ground, is able to provide the product, the experience, the infrastructure, the workforce, the housing that's required, all of the various assets and externalities that the sector sort of depends on to thrive, that it's able to invest not only in demand generation and marketing, but in that supply in order to be able to deliver a positive experience, while keeping the needs of communities, at the communities and local businesses at the heart. For such a long time in tourism, I think the visitor was sort of king, and the metrics we used to measure success were about were primarily about visitation and how much tourism was bringing into the economy, but without looking at whether or not that was equitable. Is tourism being spread around to different communities and populations? Is it being spread fair? Is there a distribution of benefits, and our communities ultimately having a net positive experience where the money is coming in, but not necessarily being outpaced by the costs, to service visitors, or to build additional infrastructure that puts taxpayers in the red when it comes to having to provide those services for visitors. So I think ultimately it's finding a model that's really balanced, and has communities at the heart, not only represented, but really leading the conversation and advocating for what it is that they need and want to get out of the tourism sector at the end of the day.
Thank you, Jeremy. And I think when you look back to COVID, we did all see globally in terms of the media how having no travel affected local communities, and at the same time we do now see the extreme with the demonstrations of communities in some parts of the world talking about over tourism. And I remember a couple of years ago the World Travel and Tourism Council developed a term that they call community conscious tourism, which is exactly to your point, extending the season. And I think there's no destination anywhere that doesn't want to extend the season and actually disperse visitors so that their community is benefited all year round. I mean, Paul, from the perspective of the Bahamas, we know that beyond the environment, sustainability also means supporting local communities, and that it's really important to you. How is the ministry ensuring that Bahamians directly benefit from tourism growth? Because you are growing, aren't you?
Exponentially. Two major ways. Firstly, by engaging and educating Bahamians in all communities about the importance of sustainability, the importance of maintaining what we have, our natural capital, which of course is our beaches, our coastal areas, our seabeds, our coral, that sort of thing. Primarily through programs, as I would have mentioned before, the Reef Refuge Network, Coral Vita, which is also a coral restoration program, the Mission for Mangroves, and other community-based sustainability programs. And secondly, by investing in entrepreneurs and artisans that are in the tourism space and tour operators, and encouraging them and providing financial and other support, training, etc., to ensure that they are successful in the tourism industry.
That's great, because I know you've got a very big SME network, haven't you, that you support, which is fantastic from that perspective. And staying on community, Michael, I understand that community communication and destination policy and legislation is actually critical in terms of FADE products. And can you elaborate on some of that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, we were talking about that, the turtle video a little while ago, and the impact that it had on consumers around the world. It also had impact with a lot of municipalities, and municipalities in some areas did a little bit of an overreach and started banning plastic straws. But in their legislative language, they actually prohibited other alternatives from being offered that could help solve the problem. And what I mean by that is in many instances when municipalities wrote their language, they dictated which substrates could be used and which substrates could not be used. In many cases, there's municipalities that only allowed for paper straws to be used. Well, if you back up and think about that for a second, I have a lot of history in the paper business, many, many years there. When you make paper straws, what holds the fibers together is polyvinyl acetate, which is like an industrial strength glue. Many outside circumference of a paper straw has PFAS chemical coatings on it. PFAS is a known carcinogen as well as polyvinyl acetate. PFAS is known as the forever chemical. If it ever gets in your body, it won't leave. When you think about those two things in a paper straw and your paper straw goes into your drink, we all know what happens when you put a paper straw in a drink. It gets soggy and it collapses, doesn't work very well, and it goes into the liquid, and that liquid goes into your body. So there's health risk and health benefits against that. So we encourage municipalities to let us come in and help educate on new substrates that are available that can actually solve the problem. And I think what we would like to see in our position is, instead of dictating materials, require an end of life, right? Require that end of life be met before that product could be sold within a geographic region. And as long as it's a certified solution, that it's not a greenwashing solution, which we all know does happen. So our answer to that is go get certifications and make sure and check for certifications. We have 10 different certifications from the global certifying bodies around the world that we rely on to verify that our labs have done the appropriate things and that our products do exactly what they're advertised to do. And I think the last thing that we would talk about relative to this subject matter, and our point of view, is bans don't work, better products do. So challenge manufacturers to come up with better products. And they will. Don't stifle innovation by putting super restrictive language and legislative formats out there, because what we do find out is many municipalities do a copy and paste scenario. They'll see language written against whatever the subject matter of the day is, 4 counties over, and they'll copy it and paste it and make it part of their language without really thinking through and without doing their research. We have gotten a lot of laws changed by simply going in and having dialogue with local administrators about the true facts and research and certification work that we've done. So challenge folks to go do their homework, right? There's always a better way out there.
Awesome. And but it is complex, isn't it? And it's even more complex for consumers to understand. But at this session, I'm going to move on now, which is very much about planet smart innovation for these climate conscious consumers, of which I think there are more and more now, as we say. One of the things that I know works from having seen it is collaboration in terms of sharing great stories. If somebody can hear a story and see somebody else doing something great, then let's share it and allow them to do the same. So I'd love to just talk for a little bit about some inspiring examples of products and experiences that you've come across. Or Paul, in the Bahamas, I mean, you celebrate 50 years this year of the People to People program. So you have been ahead of many in community tourism with the 50th anniversary. And I'd love you to highlight a couple of examples of any hotel or resort or tour operator that's really leading the way in terms of these experiences for travelers.
Well, firstly, the People to People program, as you rightly said, is a award-winning, celebrated program whereby we pair visitors with Bahamians of similar interests, hobbies, etc. Usually, they start off as just visitors meeting a Bahamian, and they end up as lifelong friends. So that's a really good example of something we're doing in that space. Secondly, the Atlantis Resort, just using an example of one of the larger hotels, demonstrates their commitment to conservation by educating not only its visitors, but by funding lots of programs. They take care of 1 million acres of marine habitat throughout the Bahamas. In the case of a smaller boutique resort, Tiamo is 100% solar powered by solar panels. You have tour operators like Coral Vita, which is in the coral restoration space, that's doing a great job with coral restoration. And then, of course, the Reef Network, once again, with the various dive shops that they have throughout the Bahamas, demonstrating their conservation efforts throughout the country.
And this is where, consumers are coming and they're experiencing and they're for themselves what you're doing. So, I mean, I must admit, love the people to people program. Now, Jeremy, I'm sure you could fill an hour of this with brilliant examples that you've come across from all over the world. So I'm going to challenge you to just name 2 of your favorites. Or
I'll do even better and just name one
Okay.
one. But it's a product that I think is starting to trend, and I'll just try to connect the dots on this a little bit. So something that we are working on actually in Scotland with the tour operator, the Travel Corporation, as a concept for low carbon itineraries, which are specifically designed to connect the dots between experiences, hotels, restaurants, destinations that are aligned with climate action objectives and are achieving some results in that regard. It's interesting because you think about low carbon itinerary, and that probably sounds really boring to a consumer. You think, okay, so let's go on a low carbon itinerary. I mean, really, it can be just great experiences where you're just not you're not producing a lot significant emissions, but that literally can be walking and biking and taking the train or an electric vehicle. So I think that ultimately the marketers will find better ways to package it and market the concepts, which us sort of technical nerds are struggling to do. But on the back end side, what the industry is doing is important, because it's finding ways to create and package at the surface these kinds of experiences, and also doing other important things like training suppliers to qualify to participate in such a program, and really importantly, I think acting in a pre-competitive manner. So the Travel Corporation set these up and are becoming first movers, but are also they recognize that for this to sort of this needs to reach critical mass in order to scale and be financially viable, and that they will benefit from more suppliers and more experiences coming online that they could potentially take advantage of. So these are actually designed to share with other tour operators in a pre-competitive manner, to say these are experiences that we can all sort of leverage, and the more supply we have, the more opportunity there is to create and sort of create these opportunities. And the other important thing will be to align on what we actually mean. So by low carbon, because it can mean, we can define that in lots of ways. And that sometimes has been the problem with the word sustainable, which has in some cases been co-opted to mean this, that, and the other thing, and without a sort of common definition of what we mean, robust enough to be able to, stand up to greenwashing and, greenwashing concerns and now compliance, compliance measures that we could end up with something quite inconsistent and messy in the market. And we know that places like Spain and here in the Pacific Northwest where I live, there are burgeoning efforts to look at these same things. So our hope is that in working together with some of these places to align the market expectations and the sort of technical side, and work with the distribution network like the online travel agents who ultimately will, the Expedias of the world and Booking, who will ultimately put a lot of this out to the market, that we can create these sort of common definitions and not, at the very least, not confuse the market, and at its best, really create something that has the panache to take take off in the market and be something that really influences traveler behavior and decision making. And in the end, the bottom line positive aspect of that is that these will be great experiences, writ large. Not even with the with the low carbon piece sort of defined, however it's defined. I think these are going to be good experiences for people, and they're going to engage with communities in new ways and spend money in new ways, and that's a really exciting opportunity for especially rural communities who often haven't had that same connectivity, for example, or are looking to grow their tourism sector.
Amazing. And I think the connection there is something you and I talk about a lot. And one of the reasons that we at Finn Partners have partnered with you in the Travel Foundation is actually sustainability professionals and comms people actually need to be totally on the same page and working together, because like you say, you come up with what actually needs to happen and we have to go out there and make it sexy and explain it all. So Carol, how about you? Have you got a real world example where a hotel has successfully implemented a textile circular economy model that you'd like to share with us, or is best in class, or maybe even if there isn't one, is there one that's trying on the way?
Yeah, there's two things I want to highlight actually. First, just to touch quickly on the social side of things, the sort of social elements of tourism. And we have a number of ABTA members who are very much focused on that area, like Intrepid and Travelopia. Intrepid has an amazing initiative called the Intrepid Day and FAM, which means familiarization, and it's where they have a specific day to celebrate the local culture and make local connections with local communities. So I think that's just an example of how you can implement social activities on the ground. But now going into the innovation side of textiles, there are a number of initiatives actually, because and since I've been researching, I feel that there's more than I actually imagined. So in the UK specifically, there is a TSA, the Textile Service Association, where they're developing a program to create a textile to textile recycling program for hotel linens, because most hotels don't actually own their linen, they source them in, they lease them in. And so perhaps they think the responsibility isn't theirs, but it's getting the hotels to be very much involved in that, what you call that end of life story. But I know, coming from a design background, that 70% of a product's impact happens at the design stage. So it's thinking about the end of life before you actually start designing the product. Like, how is it going? What's the more material aspect of the product? So these types of initiative involving hotels and the right sort of individuals within that sort of management structure to be involved in that product life cycle. And there's also the ECAP have a new initiative that they've launched where they're using recycled fibers and recycled linens to close the loop on fibers in Europe. And so to get old textiles and recycle them into new textiles. But the issue is, again, around where textiles originally start, specifically uniforms being polyester. Some of the hardware on textiles, on uniforms like zips and buttons, are difficult to process when you want to shred the fibers and do something else with them. The machine and the technology isn't there yet to kind of remove zips and stuff. So it's about coming up with new designs that eliminate hardware and just focus on adaptable modular uniforms, perhaps, that create a whole new different look. But in the end, it's a lot more sustainable and a lot more adaptable to a circular economy process.
Amazing. And that brings me on really to the wrap up here, as we've only got a couple of minutes left, which is really about the future. Now, I know none of us can predict anything, but if we just have a go around the table quickly, Michael, what gives you hope in terms of overcoming the global plastic pollution crisis? I know it's a big subject for a whole webinar, but if you had a couple of things to say.
Yeah, I think we're definitely seeing more adoption. We're seeing more and more customers, consumers, end users move to sustainable products. We know that millennials and Gen X's and Gen Z's and, the young folks of the world who are now maturing and in those purchasing power position within different companies out there are making their statements. They're not only asking for sustainable products, they're demanding it, which ends up putting more pressure on manufacturers to do something about the plastic pollution issue and plastic crisis, which is going to create and force innovation if the manufacturer wants to continue to be viable and relevant in today's market. So we know that sustainable materials are growing at about 5 times the rate of traditional materials. So that encourages us to continue to take on more and more different product lines. As I mentioned earlier, the overall food service business is about a $27.5 billion business in the US alone, much less around the world. So we know that most of the products in that food service space could benefit from a substrate like ours in terms of what we're doing. So having Fade be recognized now as an innovator in that space is definitely rewarding to us for all the hard work we've put into it. Being the world's first marine biodegradable product of any kind is rewarding. And, I will tell you that being a hero versus a villain sure feels a hell of a lot better.
Absolutely. And now, Jeremy, you have big plans for your big ideas framework for announcing around COP30. And I know it's a big ambitious program, but I'm wondering if you can touch very briefly on how you think some of the big picture thinking that you're doing for the future is actually going to help the consumer become more of a conscious traveler and actually feel that even one person can still make a difference in one choice.
Yeah. Well, very briefly, our campaign, which is called Where Next, is focused on 4 big ideas for unlocking systems change in travel and tourism. And it does include the consumer angle, although not directly. I mean, we work closely with industry, and so that's where our lens is. But I thought about this through the lens of how this would benefit travelers, and the 4 ideas that we've proposed, which may evolve a bit. We're doing a global consultation now to listen to perspectives on those ideas. Ultimately, we'll refine and publish the big idea framework, and then we're developing a blueprint for how to bring these ideas to life. The ideas are a global risk register, which will provide transparent information about the impact that climate change and perhaps other aspects are having on destinations. And for a consumer, as well as for investors and policymakers, this would provide information that can be useful in not maybe deciding where to visit. If a place is feeling pressure at a particular time, maybe it's not the right time to visit. If a place is going to if you're going to be visiting a place, to be more aware and educated about what is it that they're facing from from the perspective of climate risk and climate challenges, so that you can make sure to help mitigate some of those risks and not contribute further to them. So I think just more information, more open source, transparent data and evidence that can inform visitors as well as other decision makers, all the better. The second idea is a mandate for equity to be built into tourism development, management, and reporting. So again, this lens of where does what is tourism bringing to a place, and how well is tourism actually spreading the benefits across our societies? Is it reaching vulnerable populations? Is it creating a fair opportunities across communities? I think it's important that this information also reach visitors to be part of their decision-making framework, if indeed this is something they care about. And maybe at a layer down, it can also help visitors understand how they can best contribute to that equity score, because destinations are, of course, destinations want to create opportunities for people, for their stakeholders, and I think the more we can engage the whole system and in those choices that allow, in a way, you think, well, why would the default be things that are inequitable? We should flip that and make the default choice a more equitable one. But if we can inform and create the accountability around a metric like that, I think it would make a big difference. The third idea is a fund for climate justice in tourism, which would help provide significant resources to vulnerable destinations that are being affected by climate impact. And in most cases, I mean, the definition of climate justice is those who didn't create the problem in the first place or contribute in a large way are now on the front lines feeling significant impacts. So money and resources need to be mobilized, and I think travelers will be a part of creating that resource pool through which to collectively support destinations that are vulnerable. And the fourth one is probably the most direct connection to consumers, which is a move away from extractive tourism models towards tourism models that are more healthy, positive for places, and that will obviously have an impact on the visitor experience as we introduce things like low carbon itineraries and nature-based solutions and all the things we've talked about today. So I think that will have certainly a direct impact on travelers and hopefully be much more a part of the sort of traveler choice matrix as we go forward.
Amazing. I mean, big ambitious plans. And thank you, Jeremy. And Paul, we started with the Bahamas. You're on the front line, aren't you? If you just want to end on what you'd like to see, what you're planning for the next 5 to 10 years in terms of your sustainability priorities as a ministry, and then we'll have to say goodbye.
Okay, very briefly, the Bahamas' NDC targets an increase of a minimum of 30% reduction in fossil fuels, so 30% renewable sources by 2030. So we're working with our resorts across the country to integrate as best we can the use of solar power and solar energy, and obviously to heighten their use of all sustainability practices. And then moving forward, as we work with new developers coming in, making sure that they are practicing and building to climate change and sustainability best practices.
Well, there's a big job for everybody, and I'd like to thank you all for your time today. I think we could have talked for another hour. There's so much, and it's really interesting to see that the whole kind of product, experience, destination, how we all need to keep collaborating. Let's keep talking. There'll be lots more conversation going on this week at New York Climate Week. And thank you very much for your time. And maybe we can reconvene at another time and see where we all are in a year's time. Thank you.